Sattler Files.
Welcome back to the Sattler Files, and as we do each week, media is the subject of what we're talking about now, and it's funny, the media talking about the media, really.
It is.
And Murray Korff joins me to we'll discuss all things media for the week. It's been a huge week again.
It's been a big week, Tom. Obviously, yesterday ratings came out for the radio stations across Australia. Some interesting moves here in Perth and some really quite disappointing outcomes for some stations and, in fact, most of them.
It was an interesting survey because just about everyone pretty much dropped.
They did, with the exception of the ABC even dropped a little bit. Who was the big winner?
Nova, really, wasn't it?
Nobody really. Triple J did probably the best out of everyone. They went up 0.9%.
They've had a couple of pretty bad surveys, though.
They did, and I think they're back to about where they should be. But poor old 6IX, I just don't know what you have to do to get a listener there.
Yeah, a listener being the operative word, because that would double their audience.
It certainly would.
It's just it's a shocking result for them, isn't it?
Look, it is. They're down to, they've gone under 4% now. They're down to 3.3. Look, it's 3.6, I beg your pardon. It's a shocking piece of work, and they did make the change from John Burgess in Breakfast, and I can't help but think that maybe that wasn't a good move.
Well, funnily enough, Burjo now bobs up on Channel 9 this week in the whole story about the highly successful game shows, and there's Burjo, large as life on TV, nationally, and the place that he left is in even more dire straits.
In ruins. And the breakfast program, as I think we discussed last week, I said that it was probably a bit lacklustre and I wasn't expecting anything from it. Well, it did. It went down again. We gave them a bit of rope on the first survey, as you do, but now it's gone down another 0.2, and they're sitting at 3.2 now. So, and across the day there is no good news anywhere, particularly in drive and evenings where they've gone down 1.2, and that would have really set them off. It's just a disaster. The other thing that they have done, they've taken their music younger, so they've changed the music, and it's just I just don't know. There wasn't it wasn't too long ago when Leo Nelson was actually doing the programming. It was up around 6 and 7%.
Leo, I mean, long-term program director there, and he's been around forever, and right back to your 6 p.m. days and that sort of thing. I mean, he's been around for a long time.
Yes,
he took the role as the general manager there for a while.
Yep.
And the talk around town was that he was removed because he wasn't ruthless enough. And back to just being an announcer, basically. So he's not doing the programming or the management of the station, and I mean, a bit of a waste of talent, in my opinion.
Well, it is, and he certainly has a track record when it comes to 6IX. I mean, they were up around the 6s and 7s.
Yeah,
so
consistently.
They'd love to have that back, I'm sure, but I think it's too late now. I don't know what you do with that, and I don't have any suggestions other than to say they've got to be consistent. They've got to get some names back in there, and I don't know.
Do they need names? I mean, realistically, if they actually, to move younger, I understand the rationale, except for the fact that they're on AM and they sound like crap.
Then the population's getting older. Yeah, it's got to need to move younger.
Yeah, and so that therefore puts you more in the competition with the direct competitors, and making yourself a direct competitor of someone who sounds 100% better. Why would you do that?
Do something unique,
really
and truly. I mean, they've lost a couple of big names. Burjo's one. Brian Lehman, who's a radio journeyman for the last 40 or odd years or more.
140.
Yeah, 140. I did have a chat with him there a couple of weeks ago. He's doing okay, but I just think they've lost people and some of the names. And with great respect to Stuart Endersby, I don't know. He spends too much time on air, and he's not that good, frankly.
No, and there's a reason why he was a program director in a previous life, down in Bunbury and Adelaide and that sort of thing. And I understand the rationale. I mean, Leo was still on air when he was program director.
That's right, yeah.
And mainly probably more as a cost-cutting thing. But, I mean, Leo's also, Leo's not a superstar on air. Leo's solid. And you use the word consistent.
And he's easy to listen to. Yeah, he's easy to listen to.
Yeah. Friendly, amiable, all that sort of thing. Knows his stuff, has credibility, and has been there for a long time, which again gets back to consistency.
Of course it does.
And funnily enough, and you know better than I do, but I know enough to know that that's the key to it. If the listener doesn't know what they're going to get next, why do it? I mean, they might as well just put their iPod on shuffle.
When we get a bit further down the list, we'll talk about consistency when we talk about 94.5. But 6PR's next on the list, and they had an absolute disaster. There's no good news anywhere for them.
Which, when you're disastrous already, to have a disaster is like, I mean, it's like the Titanic's now been hit by a torpedo while it's sitting on the bottom of the ocean.
Indeed it is. And they went down 1.9 in breakfast, went down 1.9 in mornings, went down 1.5 in afternoons, went down, well, they stayed the same in drive, but that was already on a pretty low base. And they the only one that really starred in all of that was Chris Ilsley, who does nights, and he went up, 2.8.
And Chris is solid again. He's not a star performer, but he's solid and he does his stuff.
But Tom, what he does, and it comes through in his program, he does a lot of work prior to going on air, and his content is interesting. And look, the execution of it is workmanlike. Yeah, and he's got what he deserves, and I think he's done very, very well.
The most surprising part in that list is I didn't realise that some of those shifts actually had 1.9 to drop, but that's another story altogether.
So cynical, Tom. Yes. I can't believe it.
1.9 though, as you said, from a low base. I mean, that's a massive, massive proportion.
Well, you've got afternoons with Peter Bell. It's sitting at 5.9 now.
Unbelievable.
And look, I say this time and time again, but I can remember when 6PR under Cherie Gardner was sitting up around the 15s and 16s, and when Howard Sattler was on air with them, the amazing results that he got. It's
and just then that lunchtime or that afternoon period. I mean, Jenny Seaton's now sitting at Curtin doing her thing and doing very nicely. Thanks very much.
Probably pulling a bigger audience than 6PR.
Yeah, and I mean, Gary Carvoth could go to lunch and pull a bigger audience than 6PR, I think, at the moment. But
it's quite so. So, look, very disappointing for 6PR, but it is indicative of what's happening elsewhere in the country with stations that they are owned.
The key to it really, as I see it, is that redneck radio thing is dead and buried. I mean, the market is more sophisticated. They're more informed. Mm-hmm. They're a bit over it. They're a bit over the whole thing. I mean, you turn on the TV news and it's murder, bombing, killing, car crash, murder, killing, rape, and then the footy with someone with a broken knee. It's like it's just disaster. Yeah, we get that all day, every day. Yep. What you don't need is a half-informed smart-ass getting on the radio, trying to stir it up by basically driving a wedge through the community, which is effectively the technique that's used.
Well, after I read these results yesterday, I thought on my way here this morning I'd listen to Gary Adshead, and I can now understand why he dropped. It was a joke. Excuse me. He got onto a subject, and it was what you said, simply stirring it up for no good reason, where there are some corporations now charging to send you a paper bill as opposed to sending you a bill online. It was a nothing story, but he whipped up all the hate, and predictably all the pensioners rang up and said, we're on a pension and we can't do this and we can't do that. And it just went on and on and on, and it was the same sort of crap that he writes, or used to write, I don't know if he still does, in the Sunday Times.
And I've got to say, anyone that actually gets on a bandwagon with Jackie Lambie seriously needs analysis anyway.
Well, redneck, and it was just pathetic this morning, and now I know why he went down. I can't bring myself to listen to Drive because it's just equally, the guy on Drive, Adam Shand, speaks too quickly. He's half finishes sentences.
So there's a lesson there, isn't there? I mean, if you look at Ilsley's going up because he's a workman who's honest about what he does and works hard at it, and actually does his preparation. And you've got all these other guys that punts in thinking they're superstars when they're really not.
Yep.
Trying to turn like basically polished turds, if you like. They're sitting there. I mean, that's what they're doing, is they're getting ordinary stories, trying to whip them up into a frenzy when they're not frenzy stories.
No, they're not.
And the market's not that dumb. The market's sitting there going, really?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Seriously.
The vast majority of their listeners, and they don't have many, would be listening to that thinking, I think I'll have to find something else because this is just a non-story and it's ridiculous. There are far more important things going on in the world than being charged $2 for to get a paper bill, when the vast majority of people do have computers and will accept bills on.
I think it's more a travesty that we get charged $2 to actually take money out of the bank from someone else's ATM when it costs them nothing to transfer it.
That's right.
I think that's a disgrace.
So do I.
But that's another story. We won't get any pensioners ringing up about that one.
No, we won't. And then we moved down to 94.5, who really had a bad time of it as well. They went down 1.2. Now, a couple of things we could discuss here. One is that they made a very silly decision to broadcast football. Now, I know it was Eagles and Dockers only, but at the end of the day, they're a music station, and I don't care what anybody says, that's inconsistent. With what the message and the promise they make to their listeners, that they are a music station and no repeat work days and not this but that and all that sort of stuff, and then they go and put the football on. It's absolutely insane.
I know anecdotally, I've spoken to a number of people in the last couple of weeks who are really just switch it off because of the fact that that was their refuge. They didn't particularly want to listen to the footy. So while they're doing the gardening on Saturday afternoon or whatever it is they're doing, driving around, whatever, 94 was the place they could go to.
Yeah.
And not
music.
I mean, because it's not as if there's a shortage of sport around.
No.
And so therefore it's basically 94 getting dragged into a national network deal of a national network that they're not actually even technically or visibly part of. No. I mean, they're not part of Triple M.
No, and you can understand Triple M have a different demographic. They're very male skewed, and particularly in Melbourne, which is a football town anyway.
Yeah.
And we're not like that here.
It's
I think I related a story. Well, I did. I related a story to you off air about the time that when I was running 6 p.m. that I was asked to put a boxing match on, and we had spent so much money, time, and effort in getting the better music message out there, and then they wanted me to put on a boxing match.
Which that'd just be great.
It didn't happen, I can assure you.
I suppose you could have played like the Rocky theme or something, or I the Tiger around it, and sort of kept a theme to it, I guess. But
So look, I think, and the other thing that they've come out and said is that maybe because they've got a new member of the breakfast team, that there may be some sort of tuning around. But look, I don't accept that. The anchor is Dean Clares, and he's consistent. He's a true professional, and I don't accept that was had anything to do with it.
Well, the other irony of that argument is that the general manager of the station, Linda Wayman, dismissed the fact that footy was hurting them because, well, we've only had 3 games. It's only 3 weeks in. It's too early to tell. But the new member of the breakfast team has actually been in the chair for that same 3 weeks. But her excuse was something like, I found it a really bizarre quote, but it was something to the effect of, to paraphrase, was that, well, there's been changes in the breakfast show, so people will be sampling options. I would have thought that if they've got a new breakfast team, or new member of the breakfast team to change the mix, if you like, that you would have been expecting people to sample their offering, not to go to the offering that's actually been there. And if you look at the numbers of the other stations, they're clearly not going to 96. They're clearly not. Well, 96 breakfast hasn't moved.
No, it hasn't.
So they haven't gone there. Nova's breakfast is pretty steady.
Yep. Well, Nova's breakfast actually copped a 1.1 increase, so maybe they went there.
Well, and Nova is that's the sleeping giant here. That just plods along, and funnily enough, Gary Roberts. I know you love Gary, but
I do.
And Gary hasn't been well.
No, he hasn't.
Which is
I think he's out of hospital now.
Yes,
and recovering at home. But look,
but Gary is the king of consistency.
Yeah, of course he is. That's his watchword. And look, I know that if he had been in charge of 94, that never would have happened. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
And I can't help but agree. But the other thing about it is that, getting back to their breakfast team, yes, they've got a new member. They didn't change the breakfast team.
No.
They're still there. The core of it is still there.
And if anything, if there is an addition, you would expect that there would have been a honeymoon period, not a drop.
Of course there would.
And it hasn't happened.
And they got some good publicity for that and all that sort of stuff. So, no, when you look at this is a drop across the board. And when you have a drop across the board, you've got to look at what else you've done. And what they have done is broken a promise to their listeners about the music. Yeah. And that's as plain and simple. It's not rocket science. And I'm not that smart that it's just the way it is. That's Radio 101.
Yep. ABC. Look, with their changes, how are they going?
ABC with their changes, okay, breakfast they dropped a little bit, not an enormous amount. It was 0.7, so it's almost survey error, but they're still number one in breakfast.
Which is pretty amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing.
It shows the legacy that Ian Cameron has created for them.
Yeah, and the style of breakfast that they've got. It's one person. It's not a messy crew of people.
Yeah,
and it's. That's a point of difference.
So you got ABC breakfast, and then you got nights on 6PR. Both of them sending a very clear message about what the market is saying, and yet it's being totally ignored by every other shift and every other station.
Makes no sense, does it?
Not even the slightest bit. I mean, to use the Kath and Kim thing, it's not rocket surgery.
No, it is not. But you see, the problem we've got is that there are far too many programming geniuses running these stations. But look,
including us. I mean, we've jumped into that field.
We're the experts, but
the amateur experts.
We have done it. We have done it before. So 96 FM, they seem to have arrested the descent in drive. So that's fine.
So both listeners stayed. That's great.
Yeah, they must be encouraged by that. It actually went up a little bit, so they've got now 3.
Dave Hughes' auntie obviously lives in Perth, so that's
right.
good.
They had a good evenings, probably at the expense of some of the other stations, 94.5 notably, but they had a reasonable survey, no world beater, but they've arrested the descent.
Well, I think if it's not dropping, that would be considered a world beater at the moment.
My word. You're absolutely right.
Funnily enough, I mean, they actually, somewhere, might have been a journalist actually in the article, but tried to attribute the fact that they had a good survey on the fact that they've got a new studio. Now, I don't know about you, but I struggle with that just a little bit, to go, they've got a new studio for the announcers to sit in, so therefore they'll pick up listeners.
Yeah, right.
I don't quite get that one.
Well, I don't either, and it parallels the problem I have with stations that have a problem and then they change the logo, because that fixes everything.
Yes.
It's long been my contention that works.
Yeah, well, people listen to the logo.
As you know. And the final one we'll deal with on this particular matter is, of course, Nova. They had a very good survey, not particularly in breakfast. They're now, excluding the ABC, they're number one. So they've done very, very well. And as you said, consistency is the answer there.
They're absolutely knocking on the door of number one spot overall, aren't they?
They are indeed. And look, it's the rest of it. I think the breakfast thing is the key, because what happens, and this is well documented everywhere, this is not me at all, but when you start to have a resurgence in your breakfast audience and an increase in your breakfast audience, the rest of the day follows, or will. It hasn't followed yet in this survey, but it will.
Now, Gary Roberts has been sick for a number of weeks. If we take the same logic that we just applied to 94, maybe Gary should stay home.
Maybe he should.
Because, I mean, they've gone up in a survey that he hasn't been there, but all jokes aside, I mean, clearly
but he's
set that up.
He's set that up, and look, he will. They'll have just been following his playbook. Yeah. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
And so I'm not surprised that they're doing well. And once again, here's my take on this: that his biggest competition was 94.5. And I've always said that radio stations don't win surveys;
correct.
Others lose them. What's happening?
Yeah,
they're losing them.
And the difference overall, it's only like 0.1 or something, isn't it? It's very close.
Let me just have a look here. Mix 94.5 was 13.9. I'm looking at the wrong one. I do beg your pardon. 94.5 was 13.8, And Nova is 13.7.
Yeah, 0.1. Next survey will be a beauty.
Well, their star is on the rise, and theirs is on the downfall. And remember that it's only the next 4 weeks will be added to the last 2 weeks. Last 4 weeks, of the preceding survey. So the rolling surveys tell a story, and they can come and bite you.
Yes,
big time,
no doubt.
Look, moving away from radio for a minute, because it's depressing to see some of the errors that are being made.
Yes,
we've got this 60 Minutes thing that's happening across the other side of the world.
I am very concerned at how quiet that's gone. It seems to have it's a page 14 story. It's little snippet during the news occasionally. It's not. It's just too quiet for what it is. I'm concerned that people have an idea that this is not going to be a quick fix.
And it may end in tears. You don't know. It's interesting. There's a couple of things. First of all, I just want to make the point about media in general, because this is the media segment. Media has a dreadful habit of eating its own. We should be supporting Channel 9. So, yeah, they've made a mistake, but 4 of their employees are in jail. Who in the media can find any comfort or any delight in that? And that's what I'm seeing across the board. It's just horrific.
And given the uproar from the ABC not long before that about their Four Corners arrest, over their questions of the Prime Minister over there, it's not as if Four Corners hasn't been in a similar boat.
Exactly.
Okay, they didn't pay kidnappers and all the rest of it. It's not quite the same, but journalists in that sort of scenario occasionally cross the line. And equally, if Channel 9 as an organisation or some of their executives made some decisions about buying some ratings effectively, which is what it is, and as you said, you end up, and Tara Brown's still one of them. She's one of the employees there. She's gone there to do a job, and the 4 of them land in jail, and it's gone very quiet. And you've got to go, okay, who's actually eventually going to put their hand up here and take responsibility for this? Or are they just going to let them be the fall guys?
I can't see them letting them be the fall guys, because that would be outrageous if they did that. But here's the problem, and I'm not an expert on law in Beirut or anywhere else, but I can't understand. Channel 9 may or may not have paid. We don't know. There is. I'm not that naive that they didn't. But at the end of the day, Tara Brown didn't pay. The sound recordist didn't pay.
No.
They are employees of the organisation that probably did. But why are they the ones that are in jail? Now, here's the thing. If you go somewhere to cover a story as a journalist, a video journalist, and it's a bank hold-up or something, and you're taking movies or pictures of that, or you happen to be there when it's happening, why are you the victim?
Well, I guess in this particular situation, you're more than just... here's the really dumb part. Current Affair didn't even actually get proper footage of the incident.
No, they didn't.
It's CCTV stuff that we've seen with the snatch of the kids off the street. There's talk that the mother has done an interview with Current Affair, or with 60 Minutes, sorry. So you've got that situation. But I guess if the implication, and it appears to be from the child, the group that nabbed the children, they've certainly firmly pointed the finger at Channel 9 to say they've paid for this.
Yep.
So I guess that changes the thing, as opposed to cameramen videoing a bank robbery. Again, I suppose the cross-boundary stuff, the people in Beirut, or the officials in Beirut, are not able to prosecute the executives at Channel 9. So they got the next best thing. They've got their agents.
That's it. But whether or not that's fair in our eyes...
Well, it's not...
I don't believe it is.
I don't think it has anything to do with our eyes. That's the problem.
No, that's the problem. And they're subject to law in Lebanon, and that's the end of that.
I suppose the other equation to look at is that you go to things like the Barley 9 and stuff like that. If you use that drug analogy, it's not the person that's actually initiated the whole thing and done the deal. It's the drug mule that
Yes,
ends
I
up
guess
getting pinged.
That's a point.
So here we have a situation where you've got sort of the equivalent. You've got the mules.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's the best we're going to get.
Yeah.
You know, they came over here supposedly, or you'd expect with some knowledge of what's gone on, that it's a paid deal.
Yeah.
It would be hard to believe that they weren't aware of that.
Oh, look, I'm absolutely certain they were. And look, you know, it's all about risk assessments as well when you do something like that in another country. And I think Channel 9 has an awful lot to answer for, and I'm sure they will. Because if those four are locked up for the next 20 years, there's 4 staff members that they don't have and that they'll be still paying salaries for.
Yeah, I would hope that the issue is a bit bigger than that.
Oh, I hope so too.
Yeah.
I really do. But the bottom line is that...
because how would you be if you were another cameraman at Channel 9?
Yeah, well, you wouldn't be
going
outside of Sydney, would you?
we want to send you off for a job.
Yeah, well, good luck with that. I've got to wash my hair.
Yeah.
Look, it's an awful situation. I mean, talking to John Ryan a bit earlier, who does the corruption and terrorism segments and so on, he said the only way this is going to be resolved is with money. It has to be done in a way that causes no offence to Lebanon.
Yes.
Or to any of the officials in Beirut, and that's the only thing that's going to fix this.
And then, of course, having rogue journalists and really, really, really articulate people like Jackie Lambie running around. Entering the discussion, that's going to help the cause. That's not going to offend anyone.
No, not at all. Not at
Much.
all. It's just dreadful. But I think the point that and one of the other things that
I think we should get Pauline Hanson as negotiator.
That'd work, wouldn't it? Not. They'd all be executed instead of just in jail.
Yeah.
The other point that I'd like to make is so many comments I've read by journalists in newspapers about this particular issue is they say, oh, it's a ratings grab. Well, guess what? Everything the television station does throughout its entire day is for ratings.
Well,
whether it's this or anything that they don't do it for altruistic reasons.
No, and even the newspapers, I've got to say, some of the the very corny headlines and stuff that are on the front page and stuff are designed to attract attention to get readers. That's what the media does.
But to say that it's a ratings grab on the basis of that ratings grab equals bad, that's what they do. They're a commercial organisation, and just imagine if it had actually succeeded, they would have had the story of the century, and their ratings would have gone through the roof. That's what they do. That's what they're there for. That's what they have to do. Without ratings, guess what? There's no money. Just ask 6IX about that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's disappointing that our own media does this sort of stuff to its media, our media colleagues.
It's all the usual stuff, isn't it? It's tall poppy syndrome, it's jealousy and all the rest of it. And I've got to say, I actually think to a certain degree, it's not just a media trait. I actually think it's something that we do pretty well in this country.
We do. There's no doubt about that. But when it's played out like this, where the media is eating the media, I mean, I just find that so distasteful, and I don't find it's in the right sort of spirit at all in the way that this has been done. It's just dreadful. Very
true. Any other television news that springs to mind? I haven't seen anything on television that's caught my eye this week.
Oh, look, television is just disappointing. I mean, some of the programs that are rating are quite nauseating.
I've become addicted to Suits on Netflix, for what it's worth.
That's a good program.
I'm absolutely burning through that at the moment. It is magnificent.
Yeah.
And my daughter who turned 16 today, so
did she?
Grown up, yes.
Happy birthday, Annie.
Yes, had lunch with her yesterday, and she's got a car today, so that's scary.
Wow.
But she put me onto Suits a few weeks. Yeah, true, way ahead of me, and always has been. But she put me onto Suits a few weeks ago, and great show. And some of the selection on Netflix again augurs badly for commercial television.
Look, things like Married at First Sight rates its socks off, and I find that disappointing. And other things like the 7-year switch, voyeurism at its worst.
Yeah.
I have a guilty pleasure. I love watching Gogglebox. I think it's funny.
I actually can't bring myself to watch an episode of it. I see the ads and that's enough for me.
I just find it incredibly funny. That's me. Everybody's got to have a guilty pleasure.
Yeah, it's sort of like a very narrow, sicko version of Big Brother, isn't it?
And I had to ask Despine what Malacca was. I didn't know it's a particular Greek, and those two Greek ladies are so funny. But anyway, there you go.
Always interesting, and we'll speak media again with you very shortly.
I look forward to it, Tom.
Excellent. Murray Korff, talking media, and we'll be back with more very shortly on the Sattler Files.
This is the Sattler Files.